Hi guys, here's another chat about tips video, and today we're going to have a chat about UV resin. A few tips and things as well. This is the one I use, which is the Chow Chow DIY hard resin. I get mine from AliExpress. It's about £14, and it can be used for UV or UV or LED. I've just got a plain UV lamp, a 36 watt one, and this is it's quite thick. When it's cool in the room, you can warm it up, of course. So this is the resin that I use. So first things I'm going to talk about tips wise is, some of you noticed in another video that I was using these little stands, and I've just made them out of scrap clay, and they've just got a bit of blue tack on the top, and they're dead simple to make. Just get yourself a bit of scrap clay, and you know, you can make it as fancy or as unfancy as you wish, but if you just make yourself a little base, make sure that's nice and flat, and then make yourself a little tower, and again make sure that's flat. I use one of my little thin stamping things, and I do them about 1 inch high. That's plenty. I'm just going to make this one a little bit thinner. And then I just kind of check from the side to make sure it's reasonably level, and then pop that into the oven. And I'm going to do about 45 minutes because it is quite thick. Pop it in the oven, and then once it's baked, let's just get rid of that. Once it's baked, you'll end up with a couple of things like this. And then what I do is, now in the UK we call this blue tack. It's the stuff you hang posters. Oh, it's a bit cold. It's the stuff you hang posters up with. You know, in schools or, you know, in your kids' bedrooms and stuff. I'm assuming most craft places would sell it, and stationers like Staples. I think you've got Staples in the States, haven't you? So yeah, it's just like a tacky putty, for want of a better word, but it stays tacky once you've warmed it up a bit. It stays tacky. So that's now warm, and all I do is I just put a blob on top of my little resin stand, and then whatever I want to resin sticks on, and I can resin and pop that straight into my machine without disturbing it. So yeah, I find these really useful because I apply my resin with a brush. I don't use the, you know, pooling method. I just find it way too messy, way too messy, and then I can't pick it up, and oh, it just drives me mad. So I just made these little, I just thought it, you know, make a little stand and do it that way. So yeah, brushes. These are nail brushes. It's like a that's a filbert style one, and that's a round. I have tried it with a normal art brush, so as long as it's a good quality art brush, you'll be fine. But the cheaper ones, you need to clean your brushes in acetone or alcohol, and it melts the bristles. So a good quality brush, or again, pop on AliExpress, find yourself a couple of acrylic nail brushes. Again, 99p, £1.50, you know, the pence. And I have, well, you could tell we're all a bit chat. I've had these for years because I used to do my own nails with this one, and I bought this one just so I had a bigger brush not long ago. It's one of those that you can protect the bristles with. So yeah, brushes. Just going to talk about UV resin for a minute. It's been around, don't know if you know, if you're aware even, that it's been around now for probably 40, maybe 50 years. It's been used in the printing industry, the electronics industry. You know, they laminate wood with it, they laminate plastics with it to give it a gloss. It has been used, you know, in an industrial sense for many, many years, and of course the nail industry has picked up on it. I do believe that there's a layer of it between your screen and the electronics in your phone. You know, it's got lots and lots and lots of uses. And I do prefer this for using on cabochons and stuff. I do use a two-parter one for making cabochons, like this one for example, because it just won't set. You know, realistically you're looking at 1/4 of an inch, which is what in millimeters, maybe 5 or 6 millimeters thickness, and that would be one of your super duper high-end, high quality UV resins. So anything thicker than 1/4 of an inch, it's just not going to set in a home setting. These are my personal beliefs. So yeah, I used to be a civil engineer, so I've had a lot to do with plastics and polymers and acrylics and monomers and things like that. Things have come along, you know, in my line of work. So I'm pretty reasonably clued up on how things work. You know, like the tacky layer that you sometimes get on some of the cheaper brands of UV resin. That's just because the oxygen doesn't allow it to properly cure. So you end up with that inhibition layer, as they call it. And it's inhibited because of oxygen. And again, you can wipe it off with you know, a bit of acetone or alcohol, but I actually find on the odd occasion, if I put this on a little bit too thick, I will get this greasy, not sticky layer like you do with some. It's like a greasy layer, and I just find soap and water perfect. Just give it a quick dunk in some warm soapy water, let it sit a minute, and then give it a dry with you know, a non-fluffy cloth, and it's perfect, it's fine. And I very rarely with this stuff get an inhibition layer on them. And this is just a pendant I've made, like a 4-stone technique, and I don't really like to dome them. I use it mainly as just a protective coating, and plus, if you've probably heard me mention previously, I hate sanding. So I can sand off any rough burrs and get the surface nice, and then put my resin on, and it obviously covers a multitude of sins, but just beware if you've got a mark or a thumbprint, something like that, it won't cover it. I know because I've tried, especially on, I use a lot of black. If you get a thumbprint on black and go over it with resin, it magnifies the fault rather than hide the fault. So they're just a few things to bear in mind when you're using your resins. Again, these are my opinions. Everybody has different opinions, I know. But I've been working with resin for quite a while now in general jewellery, both the 2-part and the UV. And this is just what I've found works for me. I prefer it. There's more control as far as I'm concerned with it. I don't end up with a big mess. I'm not wasting any because, let's face it, even at £14–15 for 200 grams, it isn't cheap. You know, let's be mindful of waste and the such. Anyway, now I've finished babbling and boring you to death about resins, I'll just show you what I do and then you can see. First I'm going to take this piece. Now this is made with a 2-part resin. It's just a piece of 4 amber that I did. As you can see, the mould I used, it isn't a really shiny finish on it. And of course that's the inside of the mould, and you get this little lip around the outside. It's like it forms a meniscus against the mould. That's why you get this little dimple. So I'm going to fill this in with resin, and I'm also going to coat it with resin. And I don't cook my resin for hours and hours and hours, because I only put a thin coat on. It is literally set in 2 minutes, and then I can put another coat on if I wish, which we're going to do now. I've put my machine on, it's all ready. So first things that I like to do before I do any resin in is I clean my piece with some alcohol, so there is nothing on the surface, no sticky fingers, no nothing. And of course the alcohol evaporates off. So I'm going to do this dish part first. I'll take my UV resin, put a little dollop in the middle. I'll just put myself some acetone in my little dish, ready to dunk my brush in. And I'm just using 100% acetone. You know, you can get from the nail bars and the chemists and the such. And I'm just going to dip my brush in a bit of acetone and then wipe it off, just to make sure my brush is clean and there's no fluff on it. And then I'm just going to spread with my brush up to the edge. Like so. Make sure I've got everything. And what I love about this is you can tilt it and see in the light. Have you got everywhere? Is there a bubble? Is there a bit of fluff anywhere? And if you go with, where's my little, oh yeah. I just use one of these like kitchen lighters, and I just flash it over the surface just in case there's any bubbles, and that'll warm it up as well. If, like me, it can be a bit, temperatures can be a bit cold in here unless I've got the heating on, because I'm in an outside building. Right, so I'm just going to pop that in now to cure, and you saw how little I put on. And while that's in there, we'll make a start on this piece. I'll just flatten this out. This is just a little pendant I've been working on. I'm just going to give it a little clean. Make sure there's nothing untoward on it, because it has been sat on my desk. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this up in layers and get it to dome on the front. So you can see I'm just putting just a small dollop, using my brush and painting it on as if it's a varnish. And if you just give it a minute to settle, and then give it a little blast with your lighter, little bubble there I can see, the surface goes really smooth, really quick, and I'll pop that into cure. And here's our other one. I'm just going to see, and it's still a little bit tacky, but it's not too bad. So I'll just pop this back in, because I don't think that was 2 minutes. I've got my UV machine on constant, so I'll just show you some pieces that I've been working on. This is just a 4-stone piece, and I've been doing this with some clear and some turquoise. I'm not so much of a purist really when it comes to the 4-stone look. I just kind of do what I like to do, colours wise and stuff. So yeah, I've not long resined them. I haven't done the backs yet, but you can see, I mean, there's barely a coating on that. Right, let's check this one out. And that's cured now. See, it wasn't in that long, was it? So now I'm going to take another, and because my piece is already warm from my UV lamp, it'll warm the resin up too, which helps to get rid of some of the bubbles, if you've got any bubbles. If you're careful with this stuff, you don't generally get lots of bubbles. So again, I'm just dragging it to the edge with my brush. Making sure everything's covered. And you see, I've got I personally have so much more control with the brush. I've not got it running everywhere, it's not running down the edges. Got a nice smooth finish on that. I don't even need to flash over it with the lighter. And I'll pop this back in. And now this one's ready for another coating. I don't know if you'll be able to make it out. There's just a little bubble there, but with using you know, a few coats at a time, you can generally cover that. So again, I'm just brushing up to the edge. Making sure I've got a nice coat on it. Just take the excess off my brush, and this time I'm just going to run it around the edge. Just to catch them edges. And as you can see, I don't have to worry about it running off, because the coat is that thin that there's nothing to run off. Just give it a little flash because I can see a bubble. There. Just drag it down this edge a bit and more. show my little bubble is covered. Let's give it a second to flatten out, which you can see in the light. Just going to give it another run. That's nice and glossy now. I can see that in the light that it's nice and smooth, and I'll just pop this back in. And let's see how this one's doing. It's a little bit tacky, just barely. So I'll pop this back in and just give it another minute. And while we're doing that, I'll just show you. This was a piece of, oh God, I've forgotten what it's called. Where you slice pieces off. Kumigane, brain farts again. I just had a few scraps of it. So I tore it, and that's the back. Tore it and encapsulated it with 2-part resin that I'd coloured to make it look like an amber. I love messing about with bits and bobs. This is another piece. You can see down there, I've not finished coating these yet, but I've got some interesting stuff going on there. Let's see how this is doing. Yeah, that's fine. And this will probably be my last layer now. Just let it warm up a little bit. I'll insert a picture of my UV machine. I got it again from AliExpress, and it was less than £10, and it took about 10 days to get here to the UK. It's got a 2-minute timer on it, but it's also got a always on button, so that's pretty cool. You can just leave it, leave it running. And it's obviously a 36-watt one. Not too sure about the LEDs. I think they have a different wattage. In fact, it might say on the back of my bottle, mightn't it? Let's have a see. UV LED 6 to 9 watts is the size you need, and a UV lamp is 36 watts, and this obviously cures in sunlight as well. So there you go, Just have a quick shufty at that. It seems okay now. I've filled all that reservoir in, and I'll just pop this back in the lamp. Yep, cured. Let's pop some more on. Oh, wrong brush. And again, I'm just gonna pull it to the edge with my brush. And because it's the pendant has become nice and warm, it makes your resin more viscous. You can see now that that's starting to get a lovely dome on it, but it isn't pulling away from the edges at all. And I think it's because I build up in thin coats. And I think it's quicker than, because a lot of people say, oh, you know, put your resin on and bake it, cure it for 30 minutes because it's so thick it needs 30 minutes, whereas this has just been, you know, 2 minutes at a time, 2 minutes at a time. And for my final one, I might leave it in for 10 minutes, you know, just to be on the safe side. But I think generally as you've cured as you go, in thinner layers, and you'll be able to see in a minute, I don't think you'll be able to can tell from here, but this is starting to get a lovely dome on it. So I'll pop this back into cure. I don't think this is quite ready yet. Oh, it is. And I've noticed I'm getting a few little bubbles, and I'm wondering if it's reacting with the 2-part resin. But because it's amber, I'm not concerned. But I am going to put just one more layer on this, because I can just, it's just not quite filled that gap enough for me. So just one more thin coat. I'm just going to put a teensy bit more on. Spread it around. Ah, that's perfect now. I think this will be done, and I can turn it over when it's cured. I'll just give it a little flash to make sure there's no bubbles. And let it sit for a minute, just to level out, because I can see a little dimple. Brill. Right, I'll pop this one back in. And now this one's ready for another coat. And you see it really gets quite runny when it's warmed up. So I'm just going to pull it to the edge with my brush. And then let it settle. Just let it dimple there. And I'm just going to wipe around the edges with my brush, just to make sure we've got a nice finish. Give it a quick flash with my lighter, just in case there's a couple of bubbles in there. And now we've got a lovely natural dome on that. I'll just pop it into cure. Okay guys, so the other side's completely cured now. I've stuck it back onto a different block, and I'm just going to give this surface a thin coat of resin, just to bring the shine back. Like I said, the mould I used was quite, I'm just wiping it with some alcohol Guess I've got fingerprints on it. Yeah, the mould I used doesn't give me a shiny finish, so I'm just putting just a little dollop on. I'll just wet my brush again, take the excess off. I say wet my brush, put it in acetone is what I meant. Look at that sheen now. It's just amazing, isn't it? Just totally transforms a piece when you want that glaze on it. I said mainly I just use it for varnishing, glazing, you know, protective coat on things. I'm not a massive gloss fan. I prefer things to have a satin finish, but some pieces need that gloss, don't they? So I'm just going around with my brush, looking at the sides here, making sure there's a nice thin coat on and that it's smoothed out. Just see a little bit now, it's being silly. There we go. So I've got a nice gloss on that now, and I can see a patch underneath where I've caught it with the brush. I'm just gonna run my brush underneath to catch that little patch. And then again, I'm just gonna flame over just to make sure there's no bubbles. Just go around the sides. And there we are. I'm just going to pop this in now and let it cure. And here's our other piece that's been in. I'm going to put one more coat on this, and I think that'll be fine then, because I'm just getting a nice dome on the top. I don't want too big a dome, just a nice finish on it. Just drag my brush around the edge. Make sure that there's a nice coat on it. Got any dodgy patches? It looks nice and smooth. I will give it a little flash over just in case there's any pesky little bubbles in there. No, I think that's fine now. I'll pop this back into cure. I'll give it, oh, I've got a bit of a run. I'll give it 5 minutes just to make sure, because that was a little bit thicker than I normally would like. And I'll be back in a few minutes. Hi guys, just an aside here, but while I was waiting for the stuff to cure, I was gathering some of my scraps together. Look at this. Can you see? Look. This is just a little plastic bottle, cup that I mixed 2-part resin in. And I dropped a few little scraps of clay in the bottom, scraps. And look what it's done. It is eaten through the cup. Look. Literally oozing out the bottom. And that just goes to show that not all plastics are suitable for storing your polymer clay. Yuck. can't even see what the recycle number is on the bottom of that. But yeah, note to self, don't use these cups for putting my scraps in. That has been a fortnight tops, because I've used all my scraps and made this big ball up. And these were just a few odd scraps of colour that I had in, and I've just chucked them all in the bin because they were all melting in the pot. Yuck. Okay guys, I'm back. These are cured. I just did 5, maybe 6 minutes for the final. No, I'm going to call it a squeaky layer because it isn't really sticky, is it? There's no sticky layer on it, squeaky layer on it. I've got, it's not a massively high dome, but I've got a nice dome on that piece. This is my other resin piece that I did. Lovely nice coating on that. So yeah, just to quickly recap what we've been talking about, your UV resin. Make yourself a couple of these maybe. Buy yourself a couple of nail brushes or use some quality bristle brushes. Thin layers, couple of minutes. Do not poke it with your finger. Test the side maybe just to see if it's set. I mean, it should be 2 to 4 minutes is plenty in a UV lamp for a thin layer. Build your layers up. Don't wipe it in between. Just build your layers up nice and bonny. Couple of minutes every time, or whatever your resin, you know, says to do. Mine's 2 to 4 minutes. Bearing in mind that that's a thickness of 1/4 inch, 4mm, 5mm, if that. And I think that is still pushing it with UV resin, personally. Yeah, so build it up. Take your time. Let it cool down before you start poking it with your fingers, because sometimes you do get, you know, that squeaky sticky layer, but once the piece has cooled down, you know, it's fine. And practice, make yourself some blanks of scrap clay and practice your resin in on some blanks. Don't start doing it on your favourite piece of jewellery. And just take your time and have fun. And just try it my way. It's not going to suit everybody. Some people maybe like the, you know, getting a load of pendants and getting all the resin ready and doing it on a big tray and popping it in. But that's not my cup of tea whatsoever. So have a go. Got any questions or anything, leave me something in the comments. Somewhere in the video I'll pop a picture or a little video of my machine that I use, and I will leave AliExpress links for the resin that I use, the nail brushes, and my machine. Bear in mind that if you're in a different country than me, and you go to that link, you might have to change it to dollars or, you know, something similar, or search in your own country for that item on AliExpress. But AliExpress is pretty global, I think. All the items are available to everybody, so just have a look anyway. And I will see you all in the next video. Have fun. Bye. Hi guys, just thought I'd quickly show you my lamp. It's got 4 bulbs in, UV, it's 36 watt. There's 2 switches. That gives you a 2-minute timer. And if you switch it towards yourself, it comes on constantly. Yeah, no branding on it or anything, just AliExpress. I'll leave you a link.